It is a real pleasure for me to be here today. The forum that we've just finished, which announced the Siemens chair and the work that's being done here at ATS in conjunction with McGill and with Concordia, is a really important initiative in the area of Industry 4.0. And for me, the day has been a revelation. Not that this wasn't going on here, but it's not until you actually come, sit, listen, meet, talk to the people who are doing this work, do you really begin to get a feel for how real it is and how how significant it is. So it's been very, very good to have that opportunity earlier today. And then, as Charles said, round two with this group. As you would have heard from the introduction, I'm not a researcher. I've spent most of my career in Ottawa as a bureaucrat. Managed to make my way to the University of Waterloo, back to the University of Waterloo for a few years, and a detour to Los Angeles for 6 years and then back. So, and somehow I managed to find my way into a role with the supercluster. And it's been a very interesting year this past year as I went from a member of a working group that was preparing an application in the supercluster competition to becoming one of the management team that would now take this forward in the form of the not-for-profit that was created to run the supercluster. So I'm here to provide a little bit of background on what NGen Canada is, what our plan is for the advanced manufacturing supercluster. I'm going to give you a little bit of just a very rough outline of where things stand. I would much rather engage in conversation and answer your real questions rather than try to think what they might be. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. And whatever time is left to me, and Charles, you just have to give me the hook when or maybe there'll be no questions. But, when my time is up, we'll move to the next one. The first couple of slides here exist to make one point, and that is that the role of manufacturing as a player, as a contributor to the Canadian economy has declined very dramatically over the last decades. And that decline hasn't been like this, it's been like this. And so something has to be done about that, because the role of manufacturing in the economy is an important contributor to prosperity, to jobs, to innovation, to the things that we all hold dear. Manufacturing is a pretty critical contributor to all of those things. Advanced manufacturing, the application of technologies to manufacturing products and or processes, is therefore something that we need to be getting a handle on, getting control of, and becoming much more aggressive in application. And so what we as a supercluster are trying to do is to make that happen. We're not the only ones engaged in this conversation, obviously. The federal government, in the same budget that it announced the supercluster competition, in other words, here's $950 million, we're prepared to provide that much money for up to 5 superclusters. Come and give us your applications, tell us what you're going to do. In the same budget that it announced that competition, it also announced the creation of several economic strategy tables in 6 different sectors, one of which was advanced manufacturing. The chair of the advanced manufacturing roundtable was Charles de Geer, the founder, CEO of Kinova Robotics. You may be familiar with Charles, from Montreal. So the roundtables have all issued their reports, and the roundtable on advanced manufacturing laid out a number of recommendations. I'm highlighting 2 targets that it established. And you'll see up top there an acronym, BHAG. Anybody know what that is? It's a technical term. I learned it while I was in Los Angeles. It stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. didn't go over very well. Oh well. So the big, hairy, audacious goal, the ambitious target that the Advanced Manufacturing Roundtable set for manufacturing was to increase manufacturing sales by 50% by 2030, 11 years from now. That increase would say that we would be, that sales would be at the $1 trillion level. In terms of manufacturing exports, it suggested that by 2030, we should increase them by 50% to $500 billion. So how was this to be done? One of the devices, one of the instruments for this was the Supercluster Initiative. And you will see here that the federal government, through this competition for the creation of up to 5 superclusters, decided that there would be 5. These competitions always tell you that the decisions will be based on merit alone, that there are no other political considerations that go into the decisions on who the winners will be. You will see that on the basis of merit alone, these 5 superclusters are distributed rather evenly across the country. Interesting. So there's an ocean supercluster in the Atlantic, Scale AI, focusing on the application of artificial intelligence, centered here in Montreal. The Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster in Ontario, Plant Protein Supercluster in the Prairies, headquartered in Regina, and finally on the West Coast, Digital Technology in Vancouver. So those are the 5 superclusters. I should say just a little bit about these 5 superclusters. What the government said when it was soliciting bids, applications, was that they wanted these superclusters to be industry-led. There had to be a private sector board, and there had to be a not-for-profit organization created to be the vehicle to deliver, to lead in the kind of delivery of the services and the funding that would be coming from the federal government and the private sector. It had to be there had to be matching private sector dollars, and what they were looking for, obviously, was as much private sector contribution coming in to be matched by theirs. So 5 superclusters. Each of us has developed slightly different business models. We have, obviously, very different local ecosystems that we're kind of working with, that we solicited contributions from, or support from. I shouldn't say contributions, because in the application process, what we had to do was solicit letters of support from private sector, as many as possible, and we had to solicit pledges. And it was those pledges, and the amount in those pledges, that would serve as a bit of a benchmark for how real we were. So each of the 5 superclusters went out and did this. In our case, we succeeded in getting 140 letters of support from about 100 private sector firms, and then other organizations like universities, colleges. ETS was one of those. Universities, colleges, boards of trade, chambers of commerce. So a wide span of types of organizations sent us letters signed by their CEOs that said they supported our application and that they were prepared to commit X number of dollars. That X totaled up to about $800 million. So that was what we were able to submit to the federal government, saying, choose us. We represent this body of support right here. And in return, the federal government said, in picking us, said, okay, well, you're going to get around $200 million. So that's what we're working with. We have pledges kind of in that range, and we have a commitment from the federal government to give us around $200 million. I'm not going to give you the precise number because then I would be shot by the minister because we've been told not to announce yet. But, that's kind of the amount that we're talking about. So each of the 5 superclusters represents an entity like ours in the sense that you've got a bunch of people who went out, solicited support, put together a very in-depth application, and now is trying to create an organization that will deliver this funding. These 5 superclusters located kind of across the country over the last 8 months, we were announced in February. We have spent a lot of time, weekly phone calls and several face-to-face meetings, kind of learning about what each other's doing. In this process, we are already achieving, without dispersing any funding, we are already achieving the kind of networking effect that the federal government is hoping for us to do. So we've, and ironically, some of this solidarity, if you will, among the 5 superclusters has happened as a result of us kind of banding together against the federal government. All of us have been in the process of negotiating our contribution agreement. The government doesn't just hand over $2 million and wish you well. It has terms and conditions that articulate very clearly kind of what the accountabilities are and how those accountabilities will be delivered. And kind of in this process, we, the 5 superclusters, have been sharing with each other kind of what we're hearing independently or bilaterally from the federal government, and we have become bonded together as brothers and sisters in this process. That's felt pretty good so far, but the real benefit for this, or of this, is going to come in the next 4 years as we get operational, because what we will be doing is creating competitive processes by which companies come to us seeking funding. So we have membership models that are kind of different. We have business models that are different. And we will have projects doing things that will be kind of quite different, but in some ways related. As we share amongst ourselves, amongst the 5 superclusters, what's going on, we're going to be creating opportunities, networking opportunities, where companies that might not otherwise know of each other will begin to learn what's going on. So there will be companies in Ontario who will find themselves perhaps supporting efforts with for the ocean supercluster. That's easily imaginable. And that almost guaranteed would not have happened without the benefit of this initiative. So as far as our own line of business for the advanced manufacturing supercluster is concerned, we have 3 areas of activity that we're going to be focusing on: technology development, technology adoption and diffusion, and ecosystem development. So technology development, that's where companies, and all of this is going to be based on a competitive process. Applications coming to us, proposing projects in each of these areas, these 3 areas, that will be vetted and assessed by independent third-party experts, and then kind of funded to work in these areas. So tech development, these will be companies with problems that have technology solutions that they want to work out. Each of the applications coming to us will be from a consortium of companies, minimum of 3 companies, plus other organizations that would be part of that application. Those organizations could be research institutes, they could be university-based researchers, they could be from colleges, they could be from anywhere. Our only prerequisite is that there be 3 companies, private sector companies, involved in the work. So we'll be funding activities in those 3 areas. While the first 2 areas, technology development, technology adoption, and diffusion, are pretty self-evident, the ecosystem part is something that comes out of our name, supercluster. It comes also from an emphasis that has been very strong from the federal government. They want us not just to be working with companies to develop cool technologies or adoption of cool technologies, they also want us to be working with communities to support the either development or the kind of making more robust of the support infrastructure for ecosystems. And that's something that we are going to be working at, and we're going to be measured on very carefully and closely. So how does one get involved? If one wants to apply for project funding from NGen, one has to be a member of NGen. Shouldn't really be a problem. Membership is free. All you have to do is come to our website and sign in and kind of put in your company data or your organization data. University-based researchers are eligible to be members. So we're just finalizing now kind of what that data base looks like and how it is going to be constructed. But membership, you get involved by being a member. You can propose projects. We're going to be conducting workshops across the country in areas related to Industry 4.0. As the middle pillar that on that earlier slide, tech adoption. I mean, what's very, very clear in Canada is that one of the major reasons for that kind of steady decline in the role of manufacturing, the place of manufacturing in the Canadian economy, is that Canadian business leaders are very slow, reluctant to adopt technology. We are really good at creating technology. We've got some really good stuff coming, and that's out there. But what we're not so good at, and it's a very significant chunk of Canadian companies who don't adopt. And so we're going to be conducting workshops that are intended to increase public awareness, business awareness, and provide the tools for company leaders to actually kind of engage in that adoption process. This is a representation of the portal that we're going to build. The idea here is that the first contribution to this will be the company data that gets input by companies wanting to become members. And then beyond that, we will be adding information, data related to the kinds of services that business leaders would be looking for, whether those are financial, research equipment, et cetera, access to test beds. We want to make all the information that any leader of a company would be looking for related to kind of this broad thing called advanced manufacturing. We want to put that on there and make that available for not just applying for funding from NGen, but also for finding collaborators on projects unrelated to NGen funding. Just, I'm looking for X, I'm looking for a company that does this, where could it be? And so we want to build all of that into this, this portal. This is a little bit about the application process. I won't bore you with that right now.